Let's add some more contrast by adding a little bit of a box behind the typography. I'm going to go down here to my Shapes tool, going to get my Rectangle tool. I'm going to sample, get my eyedropper tool, one of these darker blues. So down here is pretty dark. So I'm going to go ahead and sample that blue, get a couple of rectangle tools, and just create a shape. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the shape, and I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm just holding down Option and dragging. And then I'm going to hold down Shift and just make that a little bit bigger, just like what we did in the other videos. I'm going to hold down Option and drag. I'm going to hold down Shift so I can just adjust that one side and just keep going. This just adds a little bit of a design element but behind the typography. So now I can select all of these boxes. I can go up to alignment just to make sure all those are center aligned. I can go up here to my alignment panel and go ahead and do an align horizontal. It's going to line all those up for me. And I can take all of these boxes and drag them behind the typography. So I have all of those selected. I'm going to drag them all the way behind my typography. I can lock my brick layer, just going to lock it. And I can highlight everything else. And I can kind of find a better center point for this. Going to do my smart guides till I get my little pink line. There it is. Now I know that is center aligned in the document. And now I know it's center aligned horizontally and vertically. So just a simple quote I was able to do by using gradient maps in my adjustments, doing some quick typography, adding some contrast, adding some boxes, super quick quote. We're going to do a couple more next. Let's say this is a very large document. Right now it's 3,000 by 4,000 pixels. That's really big. Let's say I want to scale this down and I want to do a different size. Let's say I want to post it on Instagram tomorrow. There's a couple ways we can do this. One of the best ways, in my opinion, I can keep this document as is because who knows if I want to make it different sizes. Keep this original document and just create a new document the size that I want it to be. So I'm going to go to File, New. Let's stick with a typical Instagram post size, 1080 by 1080. So 1080 by 1080 and click on Create. So there's our Instagram. So I can go back to our brick photo that we edited. Make sure I unlock that background brick layer. You don't want to have anything locked when you want to copy and paste content to another document. So everything is unlocked. So I have my Move tool selected. I'm going to click up here in a blank area, click and drag, and it's going to select all of my layers for me. Or I can just click on my lowest layer, go all the way up to the top, hold down Shift, and I can select it all that way as well. Either way works. I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to copy, or you could do your keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to copy it, go to a new document. I'm going to do a quick paste. So I'm going to go down to Paste, paste it all in. You can see it's a super large size, so I'm going to have to scale this down, which is no big deal because everything's a smart object. I don't have to worry about anything messing up. So I'm just going to go ahead and scale it down. I'm not holding down Shift. It's going to scale it nicely for me. And I'm going to fit it into this Instagram post. And this is a great way to do other types of sizes too. Just kind of size it up. See, I got my smart guides, I got my horizontal, and I got my vertical smart guides, letting me know everything's nicely aligned. I'm going to let go, press Enter, and now we are in a newly sized document. We are at 1080 by 1080 pixels. I can export this easily to be able to post it on Instagram tomorrow. Of course, I'd want to change the typography because it's not a real quote, but at least I have a template that I can use to put a real quote in there. So let's say I want to export it. We'll talk about exporting a little bit later, but I feel like I just want to let you know how to do this just in case you're excited about your project that you're working on right now and you want to post it somewhere on social media, Facebook, whatever. You just go up to File, Export, Export As. So File, Export, Export As. You could also do a Save As, and we'll talk about the difference between the two, but let's do an Export As. It's really good for digital, online kind of files. So we're doing an Export As. And if you ever post it to Facebook and it's like, wow, it's a lot blurry than I thought it would be, you can always change the scale of it. So right now this is 1 times. You can export it like 2 times the size. And as long as you have smart objects and everything that we've already done before, it should scale nicely for you. So you can always do a little bit of a higher scale if you wanted to, but you could just stick with 1. That's fine, just in case you ever had that problem. And I know it's going to be 1.3 megabytes when I export it. And that's it. I'm not going to mess with this. We'll go over more exporting options later on. Just do a quick export, and there it is, exported. So what's really good, let's kind of switch gears. We're going to create a couple more posts practicing what we've learned with gradient maps. But what's really neat about gradient maps is I have this gradient map right here. I can bring in any photo and I don't have to do that gradient map adjustment again. It'll automatically apply that filter to everything underneath it. So let's say I want to bring in a picture of a person. So let's say I have this woman with a mask on and I want to drag it in to Photoshop. Right now she is on top of that gradient filter layer. And I'm going to show you right here. Here's the gradient map filter, and it's applying it to the brick. If I drag her underneath the gradient map, all of a sudden, it'll apply to her, which is really cool. So now I don't need the brick anymore. I'm going to just do something different. I can just drag that in the trash can. So now I have her, and I can adjust the type accordingly. So we can go ahead and get rid of all these rectangles. And whenever you have like repetitive layers like this, like each one of these is a separate rectangle. I usually like to just group things in folders because it's a little bit easier to manage than having this big long list of layers. So don't be afraid of grouping things into folders. So now I can easily delete that instead of having to select each one. So now I can kind of mess around with this text a little bit more. So let's double click it. Let's go up and let's go to our properties panel, just double clicking our text, highlighting it. I would like to do a left alignment. So I'm in my left align in my paragraph options. I'm going to do a left align. And I also want to close the gap between the leading as well. So instead of 35, let's do 26. And this is where the fun begins because you can really mess around with photos and how they are structured. So right now it's this old gradient map right here, but I can always go back in to my properties and change it a little bit. So let's make it a little bit brighter. So I'm in my highlights and change all the highlights to make it a little bit brighter all across the board. Just a little bit brighter, but still low contrast enough for me to read the text. So I can move her up a little bit because we never want to have text block the eyes. And let's say make statements can be our typography. And let's change the typeface. So instead of a traditional serif, let's change this to, and what's great is you have this filter which we can decide I just want to have a slab serif. We could do a slab serif. And let's take off all caps. It's a little strong. And let's have everything be lowercase to be softer. You can also change the coloring if you want to make it high contrast. And it also needs kind of an anchor. So you have this kind of lowercase typography. It feels like it's kind of floating in no man's land, and it needs to have some kind of design anchor. And a lot of times it's a dividing line, it's a box, it's a shape, something that helps to anchor that text to that area of the document. So it could be as easy as getting a rectangle tool and just drawing a small little rectangle. Let's make sure we make it that same color. Just something to anchor it. So this is the final that I came up with after a little bit of tweaking. I felt like she was not popping out enough, all being monochromatic. So if I go to my gradient map, you can kind of see how I decided for the highlights to do a slightly different warm color contrasted against the cooler colors, kind of adds a nice dramatic effect. So that's what I did with this gradient map, and I switched that back to white to make it really stand out. And I have that little anchor, just like some kind of little design element or that helps to solidify that position of the typography. It helps draw your eye down to that block of typography. So let's move on. Let's do something a little bit different.